right, we'll walk you through the Power Nickel story. Obviously, with a name like Power Nickel, we started in the nickel space, but it's really the transformation into a polymetallic deposit that's caused the stock to almost quadruple in the last number of months. So that's why people are excited about it, and it's just beginning, which is, I guess, good for you folks. We're not going to tell you anything we don't believe is true, but it's investment, so you should always do your own due diligence, and that's what you're doing here by coming to listen to this. We'll give you some reasons why to look at investing in Power Nickel now. I think one of the key things in investing is you may decide to invest in a particular sector, and then it's a question of when is my entry point? Why would I do it now versus 3 months from now or 2 years from now? So for I think junior mining stocks, the key entry points are, in my mind, when they're fully funded and they've got catalysts coming that you expect them to hit upon. That's when these things move. So that's exactly where we're at. So we've raised $20 million in June, so we're not out looking to raise capital at this point, and we're fully funded for the next 18 months or so. We also raised it from, certainly amongst the best, or what we would call mining investors in the planet. The round was led by Robert Friedland, who is one of the most powerful, most dynamic mining investors in the planet. Doesn't invest a lot in outside deals, has grown his own deals. Also joined by Rob McEwen, who's another legend. So that's been good. We've been happy to have them. We'll talk to you about our evolving relationship with CVMR, which is the largest private nickel refinery in the world, and some exciting things we're doing there, and why it's sort of transforming us into a development stage play in a couple of years. Where are we at in the world? We're in Quebec, in Canada. Quebec is arguably the best jurisdiction in the world to be looking for critical minerals. Bold claim, but it's backed by some key facts. The three big reasons we love Quebec: infrastructure. In our case, you can drive right up route north, right to the site, drive to the rigs, and get drilling. Immediately across the road from us is a Hydro-Quebec substation, so you got power and roads right there. We're 8 kilometers outside the town of Nemaska. Nemaska has a regional airport, has accommodations and facilities for our crew. It's also the home of the James Bay Cree. So in Canada, and indeed around the world, it's very critical to have community support in a mining project. So the James Bay Cree are probably the most progressive First Nation in our country. Quebec has done a really great job of working with the First Nations, partnering with them and making them part of the process. So they're very supportive of the mining program that we're doing, and we've got good relationships with James Bay Cree. The third reason that's probably the most compelling is the financial incentives in Quebec are the top in the world. So for example, in this last round, when I raised $20 million, our stock price was 66 cents, and we raised the money at $1.25. So we got a 1.9 times multiple, and that was able to be done because of the tax structures that are in Quebec and in Canada. We've done several deals in the 2 to 3 range. So what does that mean for future investors? It means a lot less dilution, which is a good thing for share appreciation. Second part of that is that while exploration is fantastic, development's even better. So you get a 30% tax credit from the feds and a 25% from the province. So you can ultimately get more than 50% of your capex for your building your mine is going to come from the government. So that's a phenomenal place to do business. Let's talk about the project in particular. So we had a land package about 46 square kilometers. We had the nickel deposit was down in the left-hand corner, and we acquired it 3.1 million tons, 1.5% nickel. Have grown that, posted a 43-101 of about 7.2 million tons. Probably we're at 8.5 or so now. And looking for more nickel along the ultramafic, which is the host rock for this. We noted that in our land package in the northeast corner, we had a ultramafic expression at surface and an interesting EM anomaly. We drilled down there looking for more nickel and got lucky. And the best thing any miner can do is to get lucky. And we did it for the right scientific reasons, but the gods, thank you, gave us this tremendous response. So we had 8 meters of 1 ounce PGMs. So that is a phenomenal hole. It's not even a top 10 hole for us. So we followed that up with some real ringers. So we drilled 16 holes between January and April 30th. 15 of the 16 hit. Several of them were, almost half, were 10 meters of 10% copper equivalent. It's just unheard of rocks. So obviously with that success, it brought a lot of attention to the company. The stock price did very well. And we were able to make, some pretty prominent mining investors step up to the plate. I remember I was talking with Robert Friedland in New York, and I don't know if any of you have met him. He's an interesting guy and pretty intense guy. And he said to me, started looking at me across the table. He said he's never seen, copper, PGM holes like this in the history of humanity. He said there can only be 2 explanations. He said either you salted the holes or it's a duck-billed platypus. I started laughing, and then he started laughing too. He said, I know you didn't salt the holes. I wouldn't be here if I thought the case. But he said, my life in mining, when something that shouldn't happen happens, and he said it's happened to him a couple of times, he says something seriously positive happens. And so he said, I want to be at the table when that's around. So that's from Robert Friedland. So that was good. And he bought half the round. So he wrote a big check. As good as it was to get smart money, and it really was good because it takes the pressure off our exploration, it was important to add some thought leadership to the exploration team. And we've just added Dr. Steve Beresford, who came as Chief Geo for First Quantum, and then he was Chief Geo at MMG, and then IGO as Chief Scientific Officer. He's had a 40-year career of spending several $100 million searching for polymetallics around the world. My son had watched a video of Dr. Beresford where he was talking about finding the next giant polymetallic. And my son said, Dad, he's talking about NISC. You should talk to this guy. So I reached out through LinkedIn and tracked him down and eventually convinced him to come as an advisor. He came over to the site and, he fell in love with the rocks and fell in love with the boulders he found on the scene. And we ended up appointing him as a board member, director, and he's taken a major position and he's become our chief technical advisor. And he has this philosophy on a particular type of deposits that he believes are the biggest in the world. The most valuable mines in the world aren't gold, they're not uranium, they're polymetallic. And Norilsk in Russia is the only mine in the history of the world that actually has $1 trillion worth of in situ value. And when I was going through, trying to explain to Dr. Beresford in our technical review what we had, I said, it's not like Voisey's Bay because it's got the precious metals, and it's not like this gold mine because it's got the base metals. And he says, no, he says, I know what it's like. He says, it's like Norilsk. I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't that be great to be like Norilsk? And he said, look, I'm not saying you're going to be the next Norilsk, but he said, if you were to find the next Norilsk, it would start like this. So that's a pretty exciting proposition. And you can see this triangle that's on the screen. This is his dynamic of how he views these orthomagmatic deposits. So you have nickel in one corner, copper in the other, and what he calls noble metals, which is the platinum group elements plus gold, silver on the top. And in our case, he expects us to probably going to be almost equally dispersed. They have a third revenue from nickel, a third from copper, and a third from the noble groups. So pretty interesting. That gives you a very interesting cost dynamic as you move forward. Philosophically, he believes that this 5.5 kilometer stretch between our nickel sulfide deposit on the lower left-hand corner and the polymetallic deposit on the upper right, that they're probably connected subsurface. So that would be a massive strike length for any mine. But again, not unusual for polymetallics. Polymetallics are very rare, but when they happen, they can be giants. So you can look at a 10, 20 kilometer strike length. So, we're basically doing some pretty interesting technical work to prove that up. We're basically doing gravity surveys. So while we expanded the line zone by 50% this summer, we basically we also did some pretty serious exploration work that will come into play in our fall season. So we've done a number of downhole EM holes, and I step back for 1 second. So one of the big principles he's got is that with these chutes, you know, what happens in a polymetallic is you have a nickel sulfide underbelly, that's the oven. And basically what's happened is there's been some sort of hydrothermal action that's come in and swept up the copper sulfides, brought them up to the surface, and they precipitate. And they basically pulsed up there, and this is why they're such high grade. And he says, and again, unusual for normal mining, but not for polymetallics. And he said, you know, we found this copper-rich one. We could find a precious metals-rich one. We'll find a PGE-rich one. He believes we'll find a zinc-rich one. That's what his experience suggests to him. So to find that, we've gone through this process of drilling, you know, 4 1,000-meter holes, you know, completely in barren ground, just to send the tools down to find these extensions, because he's found that this will be the most cost-effective way going forward. We mentioned that you know, the success we had in the winter, we followed up with in the summer, because we're continuing to advance the line zone, of course. So we've grown it by another 50%. These pictures that you see on the right-hand side are core pictures from the summer program. We'll start to release those assays next week, so that's the other catalyst we're talking about. You know, again, stocks move when they get more drill results that are positive, so we're looking forward to getting those out. On the picture side of things, we've released 9 pictures in the last 12 months. We're 9 for 9 with great assays, so we got another 7 to come, so we're expecting to keep our 100% record. What that means from a valuation perspective is that polymetallics are a completely different valuation proposition. So the nearest one to us would probably be Bravo Mining, which is about a $400 million market cap. If you didn't look at the market caps of Power Nickel and Bravo Mining, just looked at the deposits, I believe a lot of people would choose our deposit. Not throwing rocks at Bravo; they're a great discovery. It's in Brazil, but I think it's just ours is probably, you know, better. And then you know, I think the neat part about investing is you want to, I believe, as an investor, find an asymmetric opportunity. So you're going to have a little bit of a downside, but you want to have a lot of upside. And I think that's what I think we're like radically underpriced right now, based on what we've already found, and we're finding a lot more. So the matrix and polymetallics can go into the multiple billions, and I fully expect that to happen for Power Nickel. The other thing that we've done a little bit differently than most junior miners is we've looked downstream and said, hey, what can we do to create value with the products that we have? So obviously we have the nickel sulfide. Nickel is a bit of a 4-letter word these days, but there are aspects of the nickel business that are quite interesting, especially North American nickel. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, basically the car companies need to have a certain amount of in North American content in order to maximize their giveaways to the consumers. So that pretty much means in batteries on the EVs, you have to have North American nickel, either made and mined in North America or manufactured in North America. So in nickel, basically nickel powders are sort of a key process. So we've partnered with a company called CVMR. They're the largest private nickel refiner in the world. They put about $7 million into the company to produce a feasibility study, which should be out in the next 2 weeks. And it'll be about us building a nickel refinery with them in a JV. And nickel powder is a huge growth market, 26% per annum. And it's used for EVs, but also 3D printing and armaments. So all growth areas these days. Their biggest client is the US DoD. They have 4,000 employees, used to have 40,000 employees. So they had to sell their Russian and Chinese divisions to keep the Americans happy. But there's 3 ways to make nickel: smelt it, hydrometallurgy, or chemical metal vapor process, which is what they use. It's a fairly old technique, about 100 plus years old. And then, you know, Inco has it, or I guess now Vale in Sudbury, 30,000 ton plant. You know, there's another one in Russia, and they have several 10,000 ton plants. So it's a specialty expertise, this. So the only way for us to get into it was partnering with these guys, and we're expecting some great things. In trying to sort of build this relationship, I've been going back and forth to Korea, because Koreans have been big investors in downstream nickel, and I've been talking to them. They're keen to sort of solve their North American nickel needs in 2027. And I said, look, we can't produce at NISC probably until 2029. But I said, I think, you know, we could solve it by working with CVMR. So, in fact, this is the thinking, is that we might be able to do a plant with CVMR in Amarillo, Texas, where they're building another facility right now. And we get the refinery up and running and servicing the Korean in North America and start selling $1 billion worth of nickel in 2027. And margins on that are sort of 60+%. So it would be a significant business opportunity for us, and then we'd ultimately scale that in 2029, 2030 when Niskan comes on stream from 10,000 tons to 40,000 tons. So it's a serious business opportunity for us. I think most people are here because they perceive the commodities are about ready for a swing. This is the chart. You probably have seen versions of this chart from other presenters. Don't have to spend a ton of time on it. The point of the matter is commodities are going to make a move, and often the best move in investing is to go from bad to less bad. I think that's happening now, so it's a good time to be looking. Some of the other attributes our project have is that it's carbon neutral. So we'll have probably the world's first carbon neutral polymetallic mine. How do we do that? Well, just luck is a large part of it. Hydro-Quebec is across the street, so we'll be electrified. We have ultramafic rock, it naturally sequesters CO2. And then CVMAR's process of chemical metal vapor process is the most environmentally friendly nickel process. Has no external air, no external water, least amount of CO2. So that's a big plus. And then ultimately they can build a recycling facility into it. So we can go cradle to grave in this thing. And while it may mean higher prices. Some people, Wood Mackenzie would say that. Others, for sure, it means we get our choice of offtake partners. A couple of other things that we've done a little bit differently is our technology and how we've advanced our project so quickly. We've been using this thing called ambient noise tomography. It's a newish technology out of Australia. Fleet Space Technologies is the premier provider of this. The fastest growing company in Australia right now just received a $150 million investment from Canada's Teachers Fund, in fact. And what it does is it does put a sound pulse down into the earth, comes back as a sound map, and they correlate that to your downhole EM, IP, gravity, magnetics, plus your drilling data. It gives you an amazing 3D perspective at surface, subsurface, so you understand what your deposit might look like. It also gets you a success zone of in terms of there's a scale there, you probably can't see it, but we found that in our nickel sulfide that between 3,600 and 3,750 meters per second, that's where our mineralized zone was. So if we found some targets that our geos liked, but we knew they were 5,000 meters per second, we wouldn't drill them. So this has enabled us to have such, great success in our drilling. We've been able to drill quite effectively. Last thing to talk about is that we're spinning off our copper gold exploration place. They used to trade in sort of the $20 million range, 2025, a couple of years back when there was exploration markets. We're getting no value for it now, so we're spinning it out, and that'll happen for our shareholders of record as of around November 7th. So another nice catalyst for shareholders in the short term. The management team is very experienced. Our chairman is a very senior retired corporate lawyer. Greg Mackenzie's actually here. He's a ex-investment banker running a silver company now. We talked about the exploration team, and Les has been a successful businessman. Fairly conventional cap structure for a Canadian stock. It's got the one thing that would be differentiate us from the others is that the board owns about 4%, and the top 7 people own over 50% of the company. And myself and my family have been the biggest investors over the last 2 years. So I started less than 10% a couple of years ago. We're now close to 20. Put a fresh $4.5 million in that time. So, and most of the other investors have been investors on the way through in the most recent rounds. So the people that know this deal the best are writing the biggest checks. So that's I think always a good sign for investors. So I think that pretty much wraps up my story and the time. So, cheers, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well done. I just need to ask you one question, and that is your peer group. Because, I mean, although in your name it's power nickel, but there's a lot of other, it's like copper and other things. So are you power polymetal or?
Yeah, we're probably going to change our name fairly shortly, yeah. Just because it's not, again, that we're negative on nickel, but it's a perception thing, and we'll probably be going to power metallic.
And also you mentioned the spin-off. That means that anyone who holds the stock will get shares.
Yes.
You will not, so you will not sell it and hand out proceeds, but you will hand out shares.
Indeed.
That would be very interesting to see. Well, thank you.
All right, good. Thank you.
Nice to see you again.